Have you ever felt that something changed in a man's behavior, but he never told you what was wrong? He still talks to you. He still shows up. He still acts normal on the surface. Yet deep down, something feels different. The truth is that many men do not openly talk about emotional pain. Instead, they hide it. They convince themselves they are fine and try to move on. But emotional hurt rarely stays hidden forever. It often shows up through changes in behavior, communication, and emotional connection. That is why today's topic is important. We are discussing 7 signs he is secretly hurt by your actions. This is not about blaming yourself. It is about understanding what may be happening beneath the surface before emotional distance grows even bigger. Let's start with the first sign. Sign number 1. He becomes noticeably quiet. A man who is hurt will often become quieter than usual. Maybe he used to call often. Maybe he used to tell you stories about his day. Maybe he used to share his opinions, ideas, and feelings freely. Then suddenly something changes. His answers become shorter. His enthusiasm disappears. Conversations that once flowed naturally now feel forced. When you ask what is wrong, he says everything is okay. But his actions tell a different story. Many men become quiet when they are hurt because they do not want to start an argument. Others stay quiet because they feel misunderstood. Some simply believe that talking about their feelings will not change anything. The silence is not always anger. Sometimes it is disappointment. Sometimes it is sadness. And sometimes it is a sign that he is carrying emotional pain alone. When a man who normally communicates begins pulling back into silence, it may be one of the first signs that something you did has affected him more deeply than he wants to admit. Sign number 2. He stops sharing personal things with you. Another sign that a man is secretly hurt by your actions is when he stops opening up. In the past, he may have told you about his goals, his worries, his family, and even the things that kept him awake at night. He trusted you enough to let you see parts of himself that most people never saw. But after being hurt, he begins to change. He still talks to you, but the conversations become more surface level. Instead of telling you what is really on his mind, he keeps his thoughts to himself. When you ask how he is doing, he gives short answers. When you ask if something is bothering him, he quickly says he is fine. At first, it may not seem like a big deal, but over time, you realize that the emotional closeness you once shared is slowly disappearing. Why does this happen? Because when people feel hurt, they often become protective of their emotions. He may feel that opening up did not help him before. He may feel that his feelings were ignored, dismissed, or misunderstood. As a result, he decides to keep more things inside. This does not always mean he has stopped caring. In fact, some men withdraw emotionally because they care so much and do not want to be hurt again. Instead of risking more disappointment, they build walls around their feelings. The sad thing is that emotional distance usually grows little by little. One day, he shares less. The next day, he keeps more things private. Before long, the deep conversations that once brought you together become rare. That is why this sign should not be ignored. When a man who once shared everything suddenly starts keeping his thoughts, feelings, and struggles to himself, there is often a reason behind it. And sometimes that reason is hidden emotional pain that he has never fully expressed. Sign number 3. He stops putting in the same effort. One of the clearest signs that a man is secretly hurt by your actions is when the effort he once gave starts to fade. Think about how he was in the beginning. He checked on you often. He made time for conversations. He looked for ways to make you smile. Even when he was busy, he tried to show that you mattered to him. Then, little by little, things begin to change. The messages become less frequent. The phone calls become shorter. The excitement he once showed is no longer there. You may start asking yourself, what happened? The truth is that when a man feels emotionally hurt for a long time, he can become discouraged. He starts wondering whether his efforts are appreciated. He begins to question whether what he does even matters. If he feels ignored, criticized, taken for granted, or constantly overlooked, he may slowly stop trying as hard as he once did. This usually does not happen overnight. It happens step by step. First, he stops doing some of the little things. Then he stops initiating conversations as often. Later, he begins matching the energy he feels he is receiving. What makes this sign difficult to recognize is that it can look like a loss of interest, but sometimes it is actually emotional exhaustion. Imagine putting effort into a relationship and feeling like nothing changes. After a while, most people would naturally pull back. That is what many hurt men do. They reduce their effort because they no longer feel valued, understood, or emotionally safe. This does not automatically mean he wants to leave. It may simply mean he is carrying emotional pain that has not been addressed. When a man who once made consistent effort suddenly becomes passive or distant, it can be a sign that he is hurt more deeply than he is willing to admit. And if that hurt continues to grow, the emotional distance between both of you can become much harder to repair. Sign number 4, he becomes emotionally distant. A man who is secretly hurt by your actions may still be physically present, but emotionally, he starts pulling away. This can be one of the hardest signs to recognize because everything may appear normal on the surface. He still replies to messages. He still spends time with you. He still handles his daily responsibilities. But something feels different. The emotional warmth that once existed is no longer as strong. Conversations feel less personal. Moments that once felt special now feel ordinary. You may notice that he no longer shares his thoughts, fears, or dreams the way he used to. Instead, he keeps more things to himself. Why does this happen? Because emotional distance is often a form of protection. When someone feels hurt, creating distance can feel safer than risking more pain. Many men respond this way. They stop depending on their partner for emotional support. They stop expecting understanding. They stop expecting comfort. As a result, they begin handling their emotions alone. The danger is that emotional distance rarely stays small. If nothing changes, it often grows over time. What begins as a small wall can slowly become a major barrier in the relationship. That is why the sign matters. A man who becomes emotionally distant is not always angry. He is not always losing interest. Sometimes he is simply protecting a wounded part of himself that he does not know how to express. If you notice that he is present but no longer emotionally engaged the way he once was, it may be a sign that he is carrying hidden hurt. And until that hurt is addressed, the connection between both of you may continue to weaken, even though he may still care deeply about the relationship. Sign number 5, he stops arguing about things that used to matter to him. At first, this may not look like a sign of hurt. Some people even think fewer arguments mean things are getting better, but that is not always true. When a man is emotionally invested, he usually speaks up when something bothers him. He wants issues to be fixed. He wants to be understood. He wants a relationship to improve. So he expresses his concerns instead of keeping them inside. But when a man is deeply hurt, something can change. Instead of speaking up, he stays quiet. Instead of discussing problems, he lets them pass. Instead of explaining what upset him, he says nothing. You may notice that things that once led to serious conversations no longer get a reaction. He simply moves on. At first, this may look like maturity. You may think he has become more calm or patient. Sometimes that is true, but other times it is emotional exhaustion. He may feel that talking does not change anything. He may believe his feelings will not be understood. So he stops trying to explain himself. This does not always mean he has stopped caring. In many cases, it means he cared for too long without feeling heard. Over time, disappointment can make someone stop raising issues. He starts thinking there is no point. That mindset can be dangerous for connection. Healthy relationships need communication. When one person stops speaking about what hurts them, feelings build up silently. Those feelings do not disappear, they stay inside. So if a man who once spoke up suddenly stops reacting to issues, do not assume everything is fine. Sometimes silence is not peace. Sometimes it is a sign he has been hurt and no longer expects change. Sign number 6. He starts matching your energy in a detached way. Another sign a man is secretly hurt is when he no longer puts in extra effort. He simply mirrors what he receives. If you are warm, he is warm. If you are distant, he becomes distant too. If you are excited, he responds, but without the same passion he used to show. At first, this can feel confusing because he's still present, still responding, still engaging, but something feels emotionally flat. This happens when a man feels hurt and begins protecting his emotions. Instead of leading with love or effort, he starts matching what he believes he is getting. If he feels less appreciated, he gives less. If he feels less understood, he opens up less. If he feels distance, he creates distance too. It is not always intentional. Sometimes it is a defense mechanism. He may be thinking without saying it, I will only give what I receive. This shift can make the relationship feel different very quickly. Before, there was effort from both sides. Now, it feels like everything depends on the other person's energy. The emotional warmth becomes inconsistent. The connection starts to feel conditional. And that is where the problem begins. Because love and connection are no longer flowing freely, they are being measured and mirrored. A man who once went out of his way for you may now seem passive, not because he stopped caring, but because he feels emotionally drained or hurt. When this happens, the relationship can feel like a silent exchange instead of a shared bond. And if nothing is done to rebuild trust and emotional safety, the gap between both people can continue to grow without either of them fully realizing it. Sign number 7. He no longer tries to resolve conflicts. This is often the final and most serious sign that a man is secretly hurt by your actions. In the past, he may have tried to fix things after disagreements. He may have asked questions. He may have tried to understand your side. He may have stayed engaged until the issue was resolved. But now something has changed. When conflict happens, he no longer pushes for solutions. He does not ask questions anymore. He does not try to explain his feelings. He simply lets things remain unresolved. Sometimes he goes silent. Sometimes he walks away from the conversation. And sometimes he acts like nothing happened at all. At first, this may seem like maturity or patience, but in reality, it can be emotional withdrawal. It often happens when a man feels that trying to fix things no longer leads to change. He may feel unheard, misunderstood, or emotionally exhausted. So instead of continuing to fight for resolution, he gives up on the process. This does not mean he is okay with the situation. It means he no longer has the emotional energy to keep trying. And this is very important to understand because when a man stops trying to resolve conflict, it is not the absence of problems, it is the absence of hope that things will improve. Over time, unresolved issues begin to build up quietly. Nothing is truly fixed, nothing is truly healed, everything is just left unspoken. And that silence can create a deep emotional gap between two people. If this sign is ignored, the relationship may slowly move from communication to avoidance, to complete emotional distance. That is why this is one of the most important signs to pay attention to. So now you have seen the 7 signs that you may be secretly hurt by your actions, from becoming quiet to withdrawing emotionally to stopping effort and even avoiding conflict. These are all ways hidden pain can show up in behavior. But here's something very important to understand. Not every change in a man's behavior means the same thing. That is why communication is key. If you notice these signs, the worst thing to do is assume or overthink silently. Healthy relationships are built on understanding, not guessing. Sometimes a simple, honest conversation can reveal what is really going on beneath the surface. Ask questions with care, listen without judgment, and pay attention not only to what is said, but how it is said. Because many men do not openly express emotional pain, but they still show it through their actions. And when emotional hurt is ignored for too long, it can slowly turn into distance that becomes harder to fix. So the goal is not to blame yourself or blame him. The goal is awareness because awareness is the first step to healing and better connection. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever noticed any of these signs in someone before? What do you think is the biggest reason men hide emotional hurt instead of talking about it? Let me know in the comments.